It's Saturday afternoon, and it's not quite 1 o'clock, but we're getting closer to it. And a couple things to start things off that um, posting a title. Usually I just go live and I talk about whatever. Now I'm going to go live and still talk about whatever. However, at least I might, on some days, have a particular topic of interest that, at the very least, I'll start with. And if anyone pops in, what would be cool? What are your thoughts on the topic? Um, Here's the question: is there a better version of you? And we can think of that. Um, hey, Barefoot, how are you? Um, I'm talking about, is there a better version of you? And that's in terms of anything across the board, but in particular, when we come to our sessions, are we competing against what we did yesterday? Are we competing with the version of ourselves yesterday? Um, Across the whole fitness spectrum, Barefoot says he is cooking mushroom tempeh, red lentil dal, um, papadome. Am I saying that right? And hummus. That sounds really good, actually. That sounds high in plant protein, which is excellent, in my opinion. Excellent. That would be exactly what I would want. I have lentils every day. It's the basis of my protein intake. Um, yeah, competing against ourselves. Is it worth it? Um, I've reached the point, my own conclusion, especially knowing what we know based upon the neuroscience of it all. No past version of us exists. Barefoot says, yes, about 30 grams protein per portion, but probably only 800 calories, which is perfect. Low calorie, nutritiously dense, high in plant protein. You could consider that the perfect plant-based meal, actually. The perfect plant-based bodybuilding meal, because plant protein is so much easier on the kidney. As a matter of fact, it's my understanding plant protein doesn't, even in excess, doesn't place strain on your kidney the way meat protein does. Again, I'm not saying don't eat meat, um, but I am saying you don't need to eat meat if you choose not to. You still get all the nutrients across the board. Um, Barefoot says I have a protein shake after too. We get 50. That's plant two, hemp, cocoa, and glutamine. I should switch to hemp protein. I'm using a pea protein. Pea protein is naturally higher in sodium, which really isn't that much of a problem for me, as my diet is, I don't use salt on anything. So I get my sodium from the food that I eat, most of which being low in sodium, so I can do with a little bit more that I get in the pea protein. Um, my last meal of the day, I end with a um, protein shake as well. Barefoot says we need some salt. So I agree. And I could probably do for a little more sodium in my diet. Um, so I don't worry too much about it with the pea protein. Um, but hemp protein is good as well. And it's good to get that mixture in. I mean, I do get, a little bit. I just don't purposely head towards the salt shaker. And I've actually kind of lost my taste for too much salt in my diet. However, I do suffer from cramps at times. Barefoot says that he's got a pack of tremella mushrooms to try too, and add to the shake. It's ground live mushroom meant to have benefits. I've heard of that actually, and I've seen whole food markets that we have here. Um, I've seen similar shakes, similar drinks. And Barefoot's got to go. Hey, enjoy your dinner. So, a better version of ourselves. Malcolm McCarty is here, and she is saying you probably get at least close to enough salt naturally from food. That's what I figure. Um, so when something like the pea protein has a little bit more, I figure I'm evening things out. You know, I don't feel like I need to search for more, but you know, it's always good to be mindful of what we're putting in our body. Either way. So, topic at hand. Is there a better version of ourselves that makes it worth showing up every day and trying to exceed what we did yesterday? Only time I've ever been hurt performing something outside of a freak bench press accident in the early 90s, due mainly, not to put blame on someone, but due to a faulty spot. Somebody was spotting me. I had a shoulder issue, and they attempted to have me do a forced rep, which I didn't need. I needed the bar taken off of me, which I repeatedly told him, take it, take it, take it. And he kept going, you got it, you got it. And it was obvious as my one shoulder was completely collapsed against my body and the other one was partially extended that I did not have it. Only other time I hurt myself, Bikram yoga. A little bit of a hamstring issue that oddly enough still bothers me from time to time to this day. And the motto in Bikram yoga, perform with the body that you have today, which is an excellent motto, and I use it all the time. However, they also then tell you to push further and harder. Hold a pose for a longer period than you did the last time, which means you're not performing with the body you have today. You are trying to outperform a memory, a thought, an actual thing that no longer exists, because there are no versions of you. There's just you. Milka hears me talk about this all the time. We are more aptly a verb than we are a noun. We are constantly, that's why we're human beings. We're constantly in motion. We're versioning all the time. So no aspect of us is ever static. So how can we possibly be a better version today than we were yesterday? Because we got more reps. What if we get less reps? Does that mean that we are a worse version today than we were yesterday? I know the analogy is used as in be a better person, be kinder, and be whatever. But again, and neuroscience shows this, we are versioning. So however we respond to a situation today isn't as if we're trying to be better than we were yesterday, because whoever we were yesterday no longer exists. A memory, a phantom. Duncan Walsh is here. How are you, Duncan? As a competitive athlete, not only as a competitive athlete, but as a world champion, I'm doing well. Glad to hear that you are too. As a world champion, as a world-class athlete, were you always trying to compete with who you were yesterday, with what you did yesterday? Is there a point in our lives when, hey, veteran counts. World champ is world champ. You know, I've competed in Masters division. And you know what? In some cases, it's harder. Those guys have the skill. They still have the physical stamina and power, and yet they also have knowledge that younger people don't have. So that is a tough division to not only compete in, but to excel in. What I'm interested in is always trying to be better. And is it worth it? And if we realize that there is no previous self in existence, that it's just a thought, there's no actual thing that's present. In a year's worth of time, 98% of our atoms will have been replaced. So are those atoms a better version of ourselves than they were last year? Duncan says, I think we can aspire to be better people. And in theory, I agree. And I've actually spent a large portion of my life in self-improvement mode until the past couple years, when who am I being a better person then? Because, again, neuroscience shows there is no actual past us. It's just a projection of the mind. It's a memory. That version is already gone. So if we can be the best that we can be right now without any sake of comparison, wouldn't that be enough? Not trying to be a better person than I was yesterday because that person's already gone, which is the basis of forgiveness, of true forgiveness. Duncan says, difficult to compare physical attributes in the sense of being better, but then some people are fitter at 50 than they have ever been if the youth was spent unfit. Absolutely true. And I think even, I'm taking the whole topic broadly. Fitness, spiritually, emotionally, any kind of what we might think of as self-improvement, especially, I keep going back to neuroscience, showing that there's no actual self. It's just a mental construct, that we are always in process of selfing, creating that version of a self, and then immediately in flux, being something totally other, totally something different. So even fitness-wise, the body that I have today isn't the same body that I had yesterday. So is it fair? Is it fair to put myself in that position of trying to, what I've come to at this point in my life, I get as many reps as I can today under the present conditions that are my body, my mind, and everything. A great question by Duncan is, are you better spiritually than 5 years ago? No, because honestly, I've come to that point where I realize there was no me 5 years ago. I exist only in this present moment. So should I make that comparison to a memory? And obviously, we know across the board, scientifically, anecdotally, that our memory is faulty. The me that I can possibly remember from 5 years ago, again, is a version. Spiritually speaking, meaning in spirit, it's the same me as then. Especially in consideration that, the actual, my actual existence, my actual reality is of awareness. And awareness is that which doesn't change. It's only aware of things that do change. So if we regress spirituality to its bare essence, it is just awareness, no change. Duncan asks, what about home videos of you from years ago? Do you remember your old self? I do remember my old self, but what is that memory based upon? And the memory, the person who that was 5 years ago, no longer exists. It's not even a version of myself, because, again, quantum physically, every single atom in my body has been replaced. 99% of my atoms are replaced every year. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, there's nothing about that person that exists now except for a memory. So it would be an unfair comparison. Now, obviously, I can say, I can think of those memories. I can think of a home video. Or watch a home video. Any number of things. I can ask somebody who knew me 5 years ago. But they're not even the same as they were. We've all, constantly in flux. We've all, in the processes, Alan Watts would always say, we're selfing. As the ocean waves and a tree leaves, the universe selves. So it just seems if we keep basing our lives on some type of self-improvement when no self is actually present to be improved upon, we're constantly competing with a memory, which puts us in an unfair position, never settling. That's the Buddhist nature of dukkha, which means the cause of suffering being that unsatisfactory beingness. Another great question from Duncan is, so where did we draw the line? 6 months ago, 6 minutes, seconds ago? That's the funny thing. There is no line. We don't have to draw one. What we have, and only have, is the present moment. Here's the thing. Do we compare ourselves to who we're going to be 5 years from now? Do we say, man, I got 107 Navy SEALs today. But tomorrow, I'm going to be a better version, so I'm going to get 108 Navy SEALs. I don't know what my body's going to be like tomorrow. I don't know what my mind's going to be like, my emotions are going to be like. I don't know the present situation. All of that is ever changing. All I can do is what I have right now. Today was 107 reps. Any comparison diminishes that moment. I'm not saying comparisons are good. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm not even saying that they're unnecessary. But they shouldn't necessarily be believed at all times. We shouldn't always think that I must be better tomorrow. Tomorrow, when it shows up, it'll still be now in that broader spiritual sense. Your only duty, your only job is to be the version you are right now, whatever that holds. If you can do that spontaneously, I think you're going to be a good person. I think you're going to give it what you can. Duncan asks if we can quantify, can we quantify in time the present moment? No, because the present moment isn't time-based. It just is. Time is a whole separate, not separate in the sense of being outside of it, but think of it this way. The moment you were born, you were aware. Now, we're not going to go any further than that backwards. Some people could say, well, I was aware in other lives as well, reincarnation, aware in the womb, aware in heaven and another realm. Whatever your belief, that's fine. But let's just deal with birth. We were aware, but we didn't have any thoughts to verbalize. We didn't have words to verbalize. We just had experience. We just had the moment. We just had now. When we were 6, that same awareness of who we were is still present, still acting as a witness, still the observer, and yet now it has thoughts and words. We're still aware of those thoughts and words, but all of a sudden we're starting to identify with those thoughts, identify with those words, and believing that's us. And that's the birth of the ego. which again isn't bad because we need the ego to navigate through the world. However, we don't necessarily have to believe that the ego is our sole identity. Duncan Walsh says, so if there is the past, quotation, and there is no recognizable quantity of time to call the present, is it really just past and future? Is reality just the past and future? That's not reality, because you can't literally touch the past or the future. Reality is what's occurring now within our experience, within that awareness. Outside of that is just unknown. Not even unknown, it just doesn't exist. All we have from the past is what's occurring right now. All that belongs in the future is what's occurring now. Again, going back to that analogy of birth and then 6, and then as a teenager, the only thing that's been consistent and constant is that sense of awareness. Even as our identity changes. Here I am a baby, here I am at 6, here I am a teenager, here I am in my 20s, here I am in my 50s. Everything's changed. And yet, there's that still sense that I've always just been me, aware. So how do you make that better? And I'm not saying any of this as if don't try to be better or don't do this or don't do that, but I do think in a sense we do ourselves a disservice by constantly striving for something outside the present moment. If we realize that what we have is right now, then not only is that enough, but spontaneously, we give what we have. Carlos Castaneda put it perfectly when he talked about if we realize our death is always present, always stalking us on the left side, ready to tap us on the shoulder. And if in situations where we feel put upon, or we feel the ego making demands that we should be doing something different or something otherwise, that we're too important to be here, if we turn and we consult our death on the left side, and we realize how near it is, and that any time it can touch us upon the shoulder, a large degree of our self-importance and self-involvement simply disappears. In the faith of death, what's more important than right now? I don't have an answer to that. I think that's something that we need to turn to the left and ask ourselves in certain moments and see. I know one thing. If I turn to my left and I would ask death, is it more important that I got 108 reps Navy SEALs today? I think I would hear a hearty laugh that, you know what, 107 is what you did, and 107 is enough. So Duncan says, so just speaking logically, is the first moment of future instantly in time converted to past? If you have 0 time for the present, do we construct time for the present? Well, today, for example, I don't think we can think logically for this, because logically almost means progression. This step, this step, this step logically brings us to this conclusion. It's time-based, and we are thinking outside the realm of time. In the present moment, time doesn't exist. There's just this present moment. And yet there's also time. That's the paradox. But Has your awareness of time ever changed? Is your awareness of what time is it now? And here, Eastern US, it's almost 1:30. Is my awareness, not my thoughts, not my opinion, not my beliefs, not my conclusion or anything like that, of 1:30 any different than my awareness of 1:30 yesterday? Will it be any different? Now, there will be something different. There will be a different set of thoughts. There will be different conditions in my body. I might have a headache. I might be thirsty. I might be hungry. I might be tired. I might be grumpy. But the awareness of all that will be unchanged, because awareness is not time-based. And awareness, when we keep regressing back, when we use self-inquiry to ask, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? We always come to simply awareness. There's a saying that God is omnipresent. How can that be? Well, if you are outside of time, you can be at every point in the universe and at the same point in time. Interesting. And if we take that further back and we realize that we are not separate from God, aren't we as well? If we take that and we say that God is pure awareness and that we too are aspects of that pure awareness, then we are outside time. And yet physically, mentally, emotionally, we're time-based. However, even, like I said, neuroscience, they have shown that time is basically somewhat of an illusion, that when I make the decision to move my right hand, and I'm moving it now, that decision was actually made even before I had the thought, I'm going to move my right hand, even before the thought of, I'm going to use this as an example. How is that possible in a time-based system? Mocha says, there are parts of my life that I can't remember at all, like there is a block or something. That's interesting. I'm not sure if there's an actual explanation for that. Psychologically, maybe, emotionally, maybe, stored in the body. It's a memory of those sections of your life stored in the body. But what we do know, scientifically, spiritually perhaps, from a sense of awareness, that which is stored in your body, a memory of any of that, is just that. It's just a thought. It's a thought that your body has held on to for whatever reason. It's a thought that your mind has forgotten about for whatever reason. If all we have is this present moment, which is my contention, which is the contention of every spiritual tradition, esoteric, myth-based type of spirituality, it's their contention as well, then we deal with everything in the present moment. Everything. Let's see. Duncan says, I am trying to forget my last burpee session. Yeah, some memories seem to linger longer than others. And I don't blame you. I've seen your burpee sessions. They're explosive. You don't have just the jump at the end. You have the jump and the feet lifted up behind you at the end. You have you've taken a full body explosive movement and somehow supersonic it. Just made that expression up. Supersonic. You've taken it from explosive to explosive plus. So, yeah, I would be trying to forget that as well. Bringing all this back, and it really, for me, comes to that training of, you know, trying to be a better version than I was yesterday. It comes back to the Buddha talking about never quietly being satisfied, which is what he called dukkha, which is psychological suffering. Because how can you compare that which no longer exists? So if you're always trying to be a better version of a self that is no longer in existence, you're tilting at windmills. To use an example that I believe Duncan brought up the other day, Don Quixote, we're chasing an illusion, which is always going to leave us unsatisfied, which is always going to lead us in a state of psychological suffering. And of course, the Buddha offered a way out of that, which is basically wake up, quit chasing illusions, appreciate what is right now. To be a better version of yourself means right now, be whatever. You don't need to compare it to yesterday or possibility of tomorrow. You don't have to strive to be a better person. You just have to be a better person, which we are. But we forget. Especially we forget because we're always trying to be something we're not. We're always trying to be when we are being. Which is, again, there's a closer connection. The Buddha himself was a yogi. When he left his kingdom as a young prince, he studied with the preeminent yogis of the day, eventually surpassing all of their meditative knowledge, sitting under the Bodhi tree and saying he wouldn't move until he gained enlightenment, until he was awakened. And when he was awakened, he touched the earth to bear witness to his awakening. And he declared that he was awakening, that he was awakened. And that's all there was. There wasn't Siddhartha, the previous version. There was the Buddha, which simply means awakened, the awakened one. Once you're awakened, do you have to keep awakening? That's the question. Yoga shows a way out of that as well. There's an opposite to dukkha. Dukkha was sort of mistranslated to suffering. And we think of, the famous words of the Buddha in his The Four Noble Truths, that life is suffering because it's impermanent, and we cling to that which is impermanent. And then he offers us a way out, the next two noble truths. Yoga says the same thing. The real translation was the Pali word, which was the original language of the Buddha, dukkha, which doesn't so much mean suffering as it means unsatisfying in essence, that it's always moving, always changing, and that we can never quite put our fingers on how things are right now because it's always in flux, always changing, which we experience all the time, and which we do know causes us to suffer. If we cling to that which we cherish, we know we're going to suffer when it's gone. That's human, and we should. That's why it's a mistranslation to say that, life is suffering and that there's a way out. I don't think there's a way out of suffering. However, I think there's a way of holding our suffering more lightly, of finding joy even within the process of suffering. I think we see that when we grieve. In grief, we know we've lost something. We're deeply sad. We're beyond the point of being sad. We're in this deep, deep sorrow. And yet we have the joy of what we once had, even as we know it's no longer here. So the opposite of dukkha, sukha, which means sweetness. The sweetness of things just as they are now. That's what the Buddha was pointing at, and that's what yogis point at. The path of yoga is the realization of sukha, the realization of the sweetness of the moment. So Patanjali talked about the steadiness of consciousness as we're holding an asana, as we're holding a pose, or even as we're in motion. It means we're constantly letting go. We're constantly balancing. We are constantly experiencing life as everything is going on, ongoing. Einstein famously said, "Nothing changes until something moves." And there we have it. Something moves. Something is always moving. However, our thoughts keep trying to hold on to things as they are now, or things as they were yesterday, or the hope of how things will be tomorrow, which puts us in that state of psychological suffering, because we can never be satisfied. It's against the nature of that type of striving. Of course, Duncan and I had this conversation the other day about Sisyphus finding satisfaction in rolling the stone up a hill only to have it roll back again. He didn't get frustrated. There's got to be a way of getting that stone up there. Tomorrow, I'm going to roll that stone 6 times faster than I rolled it today. He found his satisfaction. He found his sukha, his sweetness, simply rolling it up, watching it go down, rolling it back up, watching it go back down. Spent eternity doing that. So I think that's the better version. Just doing it. Just doing your reps. Just doing your burpees. Just doing your whatever it is you're doing. Doing your ring work. If you're a bowler, bowl. Not every game needs to be 300. Not every game for me was even 100. And yet, I still found that I enjoyed bowling. Of course, I drank a lot when I went bowling. So maybe it's an entirely different experience now than it was back then. So that's my contention of, is there a better self? I don't know. This is my thoughts on the subject. I've really enjoyed hearing Duncan's, especially his perspective. Being someone, as he told the story the other day, took 20 years for him to become the champion that he wanted to be. So it's an interesting perspective. And it makes me wonder, was it constant striving, or were there moments of, and I'm sure there were moments of just, happiness, joy, exactly where I am. And then tomorrow you find, for whatever reason, I'm actually a little bit better. Because really, having just that moment, again, what happens occurs spontaneously. So we're spontaneously doing everything we need to do right now. And then somehow, for whatever reason, however mystery chooses to express itself, we find that led to something better tomorrow. All right. So, again, I appreciate that conversation. I appreciate Duncan joining me. We're going to end it just about here today, just about the 40-minute mark. I have some classwork to do in my yoga studies. I'm working on my 200-hour teaching certification to match my meditation teaching certification and my breath coaching certification. It's been quite an experience for me, diving so deeply into the asanas, some of which I haven't pushed this hard in 20 years or so. So it's definitely a little sore, but in a good way. So we'll end it here. Again, thank you, Duncan. I appreciate it. Mocha, thank you for joining, and thank you for your perspective as well. And Barefoot, thank you for popping in early for just a few minutes. Hope you are enjoying your meal. It actually sounded delicious. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for burpees and, excuse me, another conversation. Does ever anything, by the way, right before I end, does ever any topic that you think would be fun to talk about, interesting to talk about, good to talk about, if you want to give me something that I know absolutely nothing about to talk about, just leave a comment. I am actually interested in talking about everything. No topic off limits whatsoever, I think. I say that now, but who knows? Mocha says Burpee Rocket Man, and yeah, you know what, Mocha, I need to show you a Duncan video, and he's most definitely one of the most explosive athletes that I enjoy watching on YouTube. And we are of similar age. I believe I'm a year older. I might be 2 years older. And I am nowhere near that explosive, nor was I that explosive when I was younger. But I think, also Duncan has spent a lifetime training to be that explosive, and it has paid off, and he's been able to keep it, which is to me just remarkable, especially to be able to do that and at this age and be injury free. Very impressive. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Take care and have a good day.